Okay, we'll get started. Uh, when Suzanne comes on, I want to say something. But David, why don't
Okay,
we start with your reading today?
okay, let's do that. Today, I was going to read to you from John Keats, his famous sonnet about Chapman's Homer, and then felt I like some watcher of the skies when a new planet swims us to his ken. A beautiful analogy where he is saying that he's feeling like the discoverer of a planet. But my interpretation was that I don't believe he was referring to the discovery of the planet Uranus that was over 30 years earlier before he wrote the poem, which would have been ancient history for him. I think he was writing about the lovely discovery of the Great Comet of 1811, and and that was only 5 years earlier. So that's what I thought that John Keats was writing about. Anyway, I love that poem so much. Then a couple of years ago, I was looking at a beautiful, beautiful cluster of stars in the Milky Way. Not so much a cluster, but a area where there were fewer stars, where you could actually peer through almost to the center of our galaxy. It's called Bade's Window, and it's named after one of the most famous astronomers who ever lived, Walter Baade. So I rewrote Keats's sonnet for that, and I would like to share that with you right now. It goes like this. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly stars and clusters seen. Round all the celestial islands have I been, with eyepiece on telescope to the night sky hold. Oft of one wide expanse that I've been told that Galileo ruled as his domain. Yet did I never breathe its pure serene till I heard Walter Baade speak out loud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies when a new star cluster swims into his ken. Through his majestic window looks upon the Milky Way. He stared at the center of our galaxy, like a diamond shining in the sky, with a wild surmise, silent in the midst of space. Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice, David.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, the addition to it is cool. Anyway, what I'm going to do is read the opening prayer, and I will read it in Hebrew this time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. I'm glad Suzanne is here because I owe her a big apology. And we'll get to that. We will see if we get to the snakes later on. Okay. I had not read that far, and so, but I did do some homework about it because I found it a very interesting passage. So thank you, Suzanne, for stimulating my questioning. I appreciate it. And anyway, we have been talking about things. One of the things we left out was in Numbers 20, verse 13. And if David, you could just read that for us, just verse 13. Those are the waters.
All right. These are the waters of Meribah, where the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them.
Okay. So the waters of Meribah refer to quarreling. all of the preceding issues of quarreling. And one of the things that if you think of the rebellion of Korah, all of the griping of the people, and also there's something else. When you're many times when people are debating, I'm going to soften the word from quarrel to debate, okay? If they feel strongly about a side, they may not because of the way the brain functions, and we always have to be on guard for this. And that is, our brain sometimes will bring in something that does is not quite true, and so that what somebody says winds up being sort of like gossip and misinterpretation. And you can see, and Suzanne, I think, can see where I'm going with this.
It's like a perception.
Yes,
Something like a perception. You're perceiving something
that
not
may not be there.
right. That's not there.
That's right. That's exactly right. So you may misquote something by not having it in front of you. You may think you're saying it correctly, but it's not coming out correctly.
And it could put you on the wrong path.
You got it. You got it. And so that I think is something to keep in mind as we go into this discussion. And that was one of the aspects of that hit me from the waters of Meribah. And so that's going to lead into where we left off because we never quite covered that. David, would you care to read from verses 14 through the end of 17? David, you're muted, David. David, you're muted. Okay. If somebody else has a book in front of them, if they could read Numbers 20, chapter 20, verses 14 through the end of 17.
From Kadesh, Moses sent messengers to the king of Edom. Thus says the brother Israel. You know, all the hardships that have befallen us, that our ancestors went down to Egypt, that we dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and our ancestors. We cried to the Lord, and he heard our pleas, and he sent a messenger who freed us from Egypt. Now we are in Kadesh, the town on the border of your territory.
Okay. So any comments about what Michael has just read? It's okay. It's okay. I thought you were going to I thought you were going to get tapped on the shoulder. You were busy reading. Can't you were busy reading and your wife just came up right
Oh,
behind you and you didn't hear her. And then she realized what was going on.
yeah, I'm studying Torah. I've got my
Yeah.
priorities here. You know.
I'm sorry. So any comments about what Michael just read? We spoke about Kadesh, when we spoke about the root word last time, and and uh, it's a sacred. It can mean sacred, holy, uh, city, and so we discussed that. And then any comments about repeating history in verse 15?
15.
Our ancestors went down to Egypt. We dwelt in Egypt a long time. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and our ancestors. Does this remind you of anything? Okay. Bev, you are muted. So whatever you said, we didn't hear. David, you are muted. And whatever you said before, we did not hear.
All right, I just it said Passover, but I have to leave now.
But yes, that is. It's a summary of the Passover story. That's
Okay,
right.
bye.
So you take care, Bev. But it is it's important. You remember it's a few weeks ago we were talking about remembering, and we are commanded to always remember and also have a Passover Seder. That's in Torah.
Mhm.
So we don't want, so, as you, the fact that we're talking about that is important to remember our history, our genealogy. And we spoke about Edom before. Edom. We spoke about that. Not Edom cheese.
Well,
We spoke about Edom, the nation, if you will.
I have a question, Marty,
Yes,
for
please.
everybody. We are commanded to remember our hardships. That's one of the reasons. On a personal note, the Jewish experience is how do I say this? Is always down in the dumps. We're down in the dumps all the time because remember hardships. We remember our hardships, and it's how do you climb up from that? We have all of these Holocaust places. Go in there and remember. And I say, and it bothers me. It's just a terrible drain on my thinking. We're always down in the dumps, always. And the perception of the rest of the world when they see this is, I don't think it's good. I think now that now to bring it forward to today in Israel, that finally we're starting to turn the tide. And I believe that I support Benjamin Netanyahu, not for politics or anything, but for what he's doing. He's doing something that has to be done. Has to be done, in my estimation, regardless of the hostages, which is absolutely terrible. But you can't no longer allow anybody to use any kind of a bargaining chip for the future, for the success of the future.
Okay.
You see,
I understand where you're coming from, because yes, as a people, we have suffered a lot of hardships, but I think there are different ways to look at it. And yes, there's a lesson to be learned out of each of the stories. How were the people able to overcome that hardship? That to me it are the lessons, and and then it gives you more um, more ways to think about any hardship you're suffering now. And you say, well, these are what the people did at various times in history. And it's not just with the Jewish experience. We can talk about other countries. We can talk about other religions. We can talk about uh, civilizations and like that. And we can learn from all of those different experiences and how we were able to overcome them.
We
Uh,
can learn, but
yes.
do we? But
Well,
do we actually learn from that?
well,
It's
we can as an individual,
yeah.
but you have to hope that other individuals will also learn from their readings too. And it may be different. And maybe that's why we have been challenged as a people to think about all of the differences that we have. Even the Talmud is built this way, and the Mishnah, and the Zohar, and so many other Jewish books, uh, showing they present a problem, and then they discuss the possible solutions,
You know, I
and
have to
that's how I look at it.
I have to say something here. Thank you, Marty. I wish Rabbi Mary was here because I she often says, well, I would say to her, well, where was God during the Holocaust of the 1930s under Hitler and the Nazis? Well, actually, I was thinking about that, and I've now I have now come to the conclusion that God was there. He was there. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because he it was a lesson for the future. This was a this event was so astonishing and so powerful that now the Jews have to now do the right thing for the future.
Yes,
So I believe he was there
and
teaching a
and
very, very hard lesson, the hardest lesson of all.
okay. I'm going to pick up on what you just said, because if you think about the Israelites and their travels, there is a lesson in hoping for a better future. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's faith. You have to have faith in your leaders, and you have to have faith in God. You may not always agree, but overall, it just keeps moving in a positive way. And I always like to emphasize the positive and learn from the negative. Yes, Marianne.
Yeah, Marty, I totally agree with what you guys are saying, but I think the one thing you're overlooking is gratitude. That, like you just said, God was in the Holocaust. Hard to see, and I'm sure there
Mhm.
are many miracles that we are not aware of, but we have to thank God for everything. There are no good times or bad times. There's just learning lessons from God.
If-
And sometimes you got to reach real deep in yourself to see that learning lesson and to find it. But I mean, and in my opinion, okay, no insult or anything intended. The Torah is written for all people for all time, not
Yes.
just Jewish people. The wisdom, the philosophy, I mean, this book talks about everything that you can learn from living life.
Agreed.
But people sometimes people just like to whine and complain. I know I have my
Yeah.
days where I just want to whine and
We
complain.
all do.
Most of my days, I'm really thankful. I'm grateful, that there are blessings if we look for them. But if we don't look for them, you may as well looking at the dirt, and that's how and when he says here, this is all fact. You're talking about this was the Passover story, but it's all fact. There's no room for this or that or the other thing. It happened. And dealing with the facts doesn't mean you have to become emotionally involved with them. Like you just said, how do we move forward to the future? And I think that's the key.
And,
I can't live in the past forever.
and that's why you are very correct, because if you read verse 16, after saying all of the different struggles, and it says in verse 16, we cried to the Lord and he heard our plea, and he sent a messenger who freed us from Egypt. Okay, so that's so, and now in Kadesh, it is probably was a holy city. It considered a holy city.
This is, and this can be all summed up on Yom Kippur. This whole thing, because on Yom Kippur, we pray for the whole world, not just for Jews. It's for the entire planet. And that's how you know.
That's true. That's true. So anything else that we get out of this, they're trying to take the shorter route to go through Edom rather than having to go around that. Yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, to add to what Michael was saying, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but in Zechariah, it does say that there's going to be another time, and instead of 1 out of 3 Jewish people, it's going to be 2 out of 3. And I keep finding the reference, and then I write it down, and then I misplace it, but it is in Zechariah.
Okay. Yeah, it's frustrating, and every time anti-Semitism rears its head, it too is like a snake. You can see where this is heading. Suzanne has read ahead, and I think that if you look at it this way, we're going to have an even wider discussion from what Michael brought up, because I think it's very important for all of us in today's world. Thank you, Mike.
Marty,
Yes,
may I
Ken.
just add a thought here? And I'm referring to the revisiting of the more recent history. It's saying, look, this is why we're here. We left Egypt, we were abused, and so forth. Well, I see that's likely repeated times throughout the Torah, and the reason is it's the core of the understanding of Judaism and its historic and ancient homeland that was a divine promise to them. And it resonates today in contemporary news. I mean, why there? Why isn't the Jewish homeland in Uganda, which was the British had actually considered offering to the Jews?
That's very correct.
That was the land. So, and it's a technique that's used often as a kind of reminder, and to the reader who, as ourselves, who do not read this every day, we're here on Shabbat, reading. It's like, oh yeah, now I remember what, it's because they've left Egypt to get to a certain place, the promised land. So
Right.
I don't read much more into it than that. But to me, that has tremendous resonance in today's world and the activity of Jewish believers and Christian believers, if they truly believe that in their ancestors, then I don't know how they could not believe in the promise to the Jews of a Holy Land. And for that, I have several friends of a Christian evangelical faith, and I get it. Because they get it, and it's sometimes embarrassing to me that they get it more than people of my own tribe. So enough said, but I don't read much complexity into that other than an important reminder and technique
Right.
that would come up.
I think, and that's what was reminding Michael and Suzanne and yourself, myself. There's some very important comments that we're going to be making today that pertain to today. Okay, and the events that the Jewish people are going through. Okay, because it's going to come up, and Suzanne stimulated my thinking about this last week with her comment. I'm not going to forget what you did to me, but it was all positive. It was all positive. Thank you. Anyway, so let's see. David, is your I guess things are working. Well, not so much, David. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. All right. Anyway, for whatever reason, Kent, you have a commentary in front of you?
I do.
Okay, so if you could read verses 18 through the end of 21.
Of course. But Edom answered him, "You shall not pass through us, else we will go out against you with the sword. We will keep to the beaten track," the Israelites said to them. "And if we or our cattle drink your water, we will pay for it. We ask only for passage on foot. It is but a small matter." But they replied, "You shall not pass through." And Edom went out against them in heavy force, strongly armed. So Edom would not let Israel cross their territory, and Israel turned away from them.
Okay. Any comments? But yes, go ahead, Suzanne, because I know last week we had a discussion about Edom, and that means red, and we spoke about who? Who did we speak about? Jacob and
Esau.
Esau, right? Okay, and the Edomites are
Our
the
descendants.
descended from
Yeah.
Esau. Yes.
And-
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the Edomites are descendants of Esau, and even though God wants Moses and later Joshua to kick all the other people out of Israel, or what will become Israel, the Edomites are left alone because they're relatives. I just wanted to.
Yeah, in essence, they are kin.
Yeah,
Distant kin now after 400 years. But unfortunately, whenever there's a separation over time, people can think differently and have a different belief develop. And rather than uniting, they may, want to continue a pathway of divergence.
Yeah, and if I could add, I think it also shows God's commitment to to family, even throughout all the years of generation. He still recognizes it. I mean, he doesn't say, "Oh, it's been well, whatever it's been." So what?
Excuse me, Suzanne, you're not coming, there's a lot of static. David, could you mute yourself just briefly? Because whatever you're doing is your screen lights up with that green rim around it, and whatever you're doing creates a lot of static. Okay, go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, I just wanted to comment that I do think that God takes family ties and history very seriously, because look how many generations it's been, and
That's right.
yet he still acknowledges and recognizes their origins
Right.
and expects the Israelites to also acknowledge them.
That's right. Now, can you think anyone think of a previous story we read many years ago now? I will give you a clue in the book of Exodus. When what happens to Isaac when Joseph is born and he gives the blessing to Jacob, okay, about his inheritance. And then what happens to, what does he have to do, what does he do and take on upon himself with regard to Esau? Okay.
Okay, I'm confused. There are too many.
Well, no, what does Isaac have to do to, you know, Isaac is fooled by Jacob, who dresses up in skin that is like Esau, and he winds up getting the blessing
Right.
for the future from his father. Okay, Jacob, you know, it winds up getting the blessing from Isaac instead of Esau. But what does Isaac do? He also gives a blessing to Esau later. He says, "Oh my goodness," and he gives a slightly different blessing to Esau, because so that Esau will inherit. And the Torah is very specific in that and talks about it. So you know, these are distant cousins that we're dealing with now. And here I think they're trying, and before I say that, I jumped ahead and I apologize. And then there's, if when after the story of Jacob and the battle with the angel or God, you know, whatever, whoever, and we're going to come across something that is going to remind us of that story as well. And it, there's another story about reconciliation between Esau and Jacob and how they go about it, and then they part their ways again. So I noticed that wasn't mentioned, that there was reconciliation. And we had this goes back a number of years, so I you know, find it, I can understand that people may not remember this part. But then they go their separate ways, and the story picks up again with Jacob and the development of his family and so forth. However, here again, we're in another confrontation in time of the Israelites, because remember, in that struggle with God, Jacob's name is changed to what?
To Israel.
Israel. And so now the Israelites are being confronted with a similar situation. And so they have a confrontation, but they have to go a different path. The story doesn't say if they did battle. It doesn't say if the Israelites withdrew and then just went around. We just don't know. But it's a similar story. And I think it's here to remind us of our heritage, just like what Moses is saying to the Edomites. We're trying to, and so it's placed here to remind us of more trials and tribulations that the Jewish, or the Israelites have gone through throughout history.
Marty, I'd like to just comment, and it's something Susan said. And if one were to accept that the Edomites were descendants of
Isaac
Isaac and Esau,
and Esau. Yeah.
okay, but okay, let's assume that. But who was given the Torah? The Hebrews.
Yes.
So then the question is, so what was to remind the Edomites of that reconciliation 400-500 years before?
A good point. Very good point.
This gets back to why the repetition of certain historical events in the Torah. But the Edomites, it doesn't say that they looked at their book and they said, hey, they couldn't find any reference to the Hebrews or to that.
And they
Because they
have
don't have it.
but in the Quran, it's a totally different story.
Well, that's
You know,
true too.
we have our version, they have theirs, and the characters that in the Israelite characters in the Quran are not the best of people. Okay, but they're spoken
Well,
of.
let's just remember, I mean, you can't, in the context of what you said, no argument, but Muhammad wasn't even born till like
That is correct.
546 AD. So in the context of the Exodus from Egypt that
Yeah,
the
over
Hebrews are
1,000
still
years.
on,
That's right.
more like
2000.
2030. So,
Yeah.
many people, including myself, can't remember what we did yesterday, much less, 2,000 years ago. So I take that, a lot of it's just mimicry and then the intentional changing of history because it's easy to do
Yeah.
when nobody's around to counter it.
And that dovetails into a discussion of today also, because there's a lot of history that's being revised. And yes, Marianne.
I have this, maybe you'll consider it off the wall opinion of this. I don't believe that God chose Hebrews, the Israelites, to be special, that he chose them to be the example of living a right and righteous life, no matter
Perfect.
what the evil, no matter what the wrong is. If you read this last sentence, so Edom would not let them cross their territory, and Israel turned away from them. If they were being evil or dark or just not very nice, about don't walk there, you don't get any water. How do you deny water people in a desert? We live in a desert. I don't care who you are, you're getting water. That this is an eternal struggle between good and evil. I don't know when it's going to end, but I sure hope it ends soon because I'm tired of it. That the Israelites are chosen, I think anyway, and this is my probably off the wall opinion, to
Well,
live as the example for God's rule and God's way. And that all of this comes back to the evil of opposing God. That's how I see it. But
You're right on
again,
target
I'm
with
new
that.
to this, so I'm sorry. If that's totally off base. But
That's all
how
we're
I
asked.
see it.
That, and actually, that's all the Torah says. That's all the Torah says.
well,
It doesn't say that we should proselytize.
yeah, we
Just
never
set the
do.
example.
Uh,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Michael.
yeah, thank you. I forgot the lady's names. I'm so sorry.
Marianne.
Oh, Marianne. So, what you say is very correct, in my opinion. Uh, you see water that's put out in the desert in the area where people are coming from Mexico or other countries. They're coming through the desert, and water is actually left out for them through the trip.
Okay, Michael, I couldn't understand a lot of what you were saying. I don't know if other people ran into that. David, every time you're doing something right now, it interferes with the entire discussion. It's your speaker or something because you don't come through, and we can't hear you. But with the electronically, there's a lot of static.
Uh,
Go
so
ahead,
should
Michael.
okay, thank you. What I was saying is that what Marianne, I have to say that Marianne is absolutely correct. Water being, for example, the water being left out in the desert for people. You see that today when people are crossing, are on the way, and let's say from Mexico to the borders of the United States. There's certain routes that the Border Patrol is aware of, and there's water left out. There's water there for those people. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, we can all hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So there's water left out for the people who are crossing the desert, and so that's just that's humanity with a purpose. That's humanity. Um, that's correct. They're not supposed to be coming, but they're there, and you got the water is very important, and most likely those border patrols it's they're they're probably not Jewish, but they get that from one way or another. They get those ideas from Jews. That's my belief, because the Torah is so powerful and it's so teaching that it reaches the rest of the world in one way or another.
Okay. Well, they're following it's also in the Christian Testament.
Yes.
You know, it's so it's the same heritage. Anyway, as far as any other questions about what we read about Edom, or any other comments? I mean, we could go on for a long time, I'm sure, but the Torah. One of the things that we're going to find that the Torah skips over a lot of information that we may want to question, because now it's going to be little snippets of information. So if somebody, David, I don't know if you will be able to read. You want to try again? Can't hear you. We can't hear you. Okay. So, Marcia, could you read a little bit, or Marianne?
Where do you
From
want,
verse,
where do you want us to start from, Marty?
why don't you do verses 22 all the way through the end of 29?
Okay. Setting out from Kadesh, the Israelites arrived in a body at Mount Hor. At Mount Hor on the boundary of the land of Edom, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, let Aaron be gathered to his kin. He is not to enter the land that I have given to the Israelite people, because you disobeyed my command about the waters of Meribah. Take Aaron and his son Elzar and bring them up to Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Elzar. There Aaron shall be gathered unto the dead. Moses did as the Lord had commanded. They ascended Mount Haran in the sight of the whole community. Moses stripped Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Elzar, and Aaron died there on the summit of the mountain. When Moses and Elzar came down from the mountain, the whole community knew that Aaron had breathed his last. All the house of Israel bewailed Aaron 30 days.
Okay, there's a lot packed into here. And because the story does not, it does not read like any other story, there are a lot of empty spaces. And so there's a lot of midrash and a lot of ideas that we can come up with. You know, Aaron and Moses are now two leaders that are really getting up in age. Aaron is the older brother. Miriam has already passed on, and she was the elder sister. And so, you know, just thinking about what Miriam contributed, I mean, she saved Moses from the water, from the Nile. She winds up being able to, the Torah doesn't say specifically if it's her or their mother that is a nursemaid, a wet nurse for the Pharaoh's daughter. And she convinces the Pharaoh that that's the right lady to have in charge. And also when they finally cross the Sea of Reeds, she recites a prayer of, in song. It's gratification for, it's really a prayer of gratification as to what God has granted the Israelites. So she plays a major role in the history of the Israelites. And Aaron, we know that he's, the next oldest, but we also have learned that he too, and Moses, because of the issue of striking the rock twice to get water from it, that they're not going to live long enough to live in the land of Canaan. But because of Moses' leadership, God says that you will be able to still see it from a hill. So now the story turns to Aaron and his death. So I'm going to ask you, what is your take on this? Because there are several different commentaries about it. The death of Aaron. Any ideas? I can. The story it doesn't say that Aaron has been failing in life. That his health has been failing, I should say. His health is failing in any way. But that to take him, let Aaron be gathered to his kin. So we can make an assumption that he is he's in the process of dying, and they're being told Again, he is not to enter the land of Canaan. And he specifically because he disobeyed a God uh, who commanded over the incidents of striking the rock to get waters. Now, what happens when what are they supposed to do when they get up to the top of Mount Hor?
Well,
Yes, please, Suzanne.
I see it as the changing of the guard. Um, Aaron was the high priest, and now that mantle, so to speak, is being passed on to his son Eleazar, and I also suspect that Aaron's death is close to the end of the 38 years. There's probably
Mhm.
not too many people left at this point.
That's right.
So, yeah, that's how I see it. The passing of the guard, so that everybody can see that Eleazar is the new high priest, and that they're getting near the end of their wandering.
Okay. Uh, the uh, yes, that is one of the interpretations. I came across one that was more hostile. Okay. That because it's an empty space. And they interpret it as a slightly different way of taking, here they take Aaron and his and Eleazar is going up there with him uh, as along with Moses, and they're going to strip him of Aaron of his vestments and put them on Eleazar. And then Aaron dies on the summit of the mount. And so the hostile interpretation was Aaron was killed. Well, I prefer the other, the other interpretation, and the rabbis certainly, speak about that Aaron was in the process of dying, and in doing so, it was the all of the uh, the vestments, the garb that Aaron had to wear as the high priest was then turned over to Eleazar. But you have to be aware that there is a more hostile type of interpretation out there because it doesn't go into the story doesn't go into details. Yes.
Does that interpretation mean that either Moses or Eleazar killed Aaron?
Yeah, that's actually in that version. But it's a story, and it goes
Yeah,
back a
because it
ways.
doesn't say that
Yeah.
in scripture at all.
That's right. That's right. So,
And it's
but
not even close. I can't imagine
that's right.
that God would say to either Moses or Eleazar, either go kill your brother or go kill your father. I mean, it makes no sense.
And I happen to agree wholeheartedly with you. And the reason I do is this story also reminded me of another story in Exodus. What does another, it's not a situation between brothers or a son, but it's about a father and a son going up to a mountain.
Oh, do you mean Genesis when
In Genesis, in the book of Genesis, yes.
Abraham took Isaac?
Yes. And here you have the story is reversed. There's a son going up with the father, and the father dies. In the earlier story, the father is stopped from killing his son, and they both come down from the mountain. In this case, so that's where that's the basis of this other interpretation.
Mhm.
Okay. But that the son there's no one to stop him. Now, maybe Moses was supposed to stop him. It's not in the story here. And so people can make up other stories. And so that's why we have that out there. But I tend to go along with what Suzanne said personally. But this was not an uncommon practice in the entire region for someone of high stature, where when the person died, the son or the whoever was to inherit everything, the vestment was passed on to the next generation.
So Marty,
Yeah.
um,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah, well, that's an interesting
I toss it
commentary
out
you
just because
shared.
it's there,
Well,
because it's there.
because it's there, but in the preceding um, line, well, in line 26, there are two
Yeah.
interesting things in there. One is that Moses was told
Mm-hmm.
to strip Aaron of his vestments. Now, it
Yeah.
could have just as easily said, "There, Aaron, I command Aaron to give you his vestments, or to take his vestments and put them on his son." But so I just that's an interesting thing, that to be stripped as though he's, if they committed some crime equally in God's eyes, right? Then to have Moses stripping Aaron of his vestments seems
Right.
just kind of weird. But what I get from it is that in line again 26,
Mm-hmm.
where God preordained that Aaron was going
Yes,
to die.
that's
No
right.
two ways about it.
Exactly.
And
And he
if
had
that's the case, then
and God had chosen Eleazar.
right,
That's right.
right. So, um, but and it didn't say, as you had mentioned earlier, that Aaron was in any way sick or ill or infirm. But he could have been,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
he was
he's old.
certainly
He's in old age.
older.
That's right.
But to make somebody climb up a mountain, um, when they're, you know, that could be a tough row to hoe as well.
Uh, the tells in Israel that are, the hills, but they can also be called a mountain. And so we don't know if it's a high peak like the Rocky Mountains, or if it's if it's a just a high hill.
But Mount Hor, do we know
I'm
where
not.
that is? We don't know.
I'd have to
Okay,
look it up. I'd have to
because if
look.
it's any height of Mount Sinai, or at least the supposed Mount Sinai site, then it's pretty hefty.
Just a second. Elevation of Mount Hor. It's 12,000 feet,
That's pretty hefty.
12,500 feet. That's a high mountain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at any rate, that's just an observation.
Yeah.
The preordained death
Yeah.
is what I take from it.
Same here. Same here. As far as the morning for Aaron, Any comments about that? Yes, Marcia.
Well, when they said 30 days, so it happened, and they followed the ways that they always did. It was the end. They had the 30 days to think about him.
Okay. When we sit Shiva,
Right.
there is also a mourning period afterwards. And
After
so
after the well, the shiver is for 7 days, I think.
that is correct.
And there's a you said there's a mourning period after that.
Hmm.
Is that the 30 days that you stay away from the cemetery? Is
I
that part of
honestly,
it?
I can only toss this out because somewhere in the back of my mind, that was one of the things that, it's a mourning period and you're supposed to deal with it. And then after a year, we have what?
Unveiling.
The
Right.
unveiling. And after that, you're supposed to get on with your life.
Right.
So everything is prescribed.
Yeah, it's very specific.
Yeah.
The death in Judaism, as far as I know, in Judaism, death is the ceremonies and everything connected with the death of a person is very, very serious. You don't go dancing and all these things that you brought you pleasure. So that whole year is a mourning process, really. And that's why after the year, it's done. Now you get on with your regular life. That's given that's another word. It's a way of demonstrating uh, life from death, so to speak. In a way.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. Now, any other comments about this? And then I want to read something from Rabbi Hillel. Any other comments? Rabbi Hillel, I just want to say, I'll start this in here, that the rabbis preserved a tradition that Aaron was distinguished by his devotion to teaching and his ability to make peace between his fellow men. Hillel said, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving your fellow men and bringing them near to the Torah." In the fond remembrance of his people, this became his lasting image. The death of Aaron, says a midrash, was as painful to God as was the breaking of the tablets. That's the golden calf story. That midrash is a grateful people's tribute to one of its great leaders, the first of the priestly line, and a human being we can understand, forgive, and love. So sometimes when we can remember Aaron for what he gave in a positive light, or we can remember Aaron for all the things he goofed up. So I think Rabbi Hillel is hitting on a very important concept. We can dwell on the errors, or we can see how they were overcome. And if we overcome it in a way that is good and we can progress to improve ourselves or the community or things like that, that's going to lead us to better understanding the concept of forgiveness and love. I think that's what Hillel is getting after. And I think it's a very powerful message. In the Christian interpretation, that would be very similar to the words of Jesus. And so this, I think, is something that the more we try to educate ourselves, the more we try to understand things, recognizing things have not been exactly good, if we can learn something from that, hopefully we'll be able to do things for others that we think should have been done before that was an error, and for the good. And that's it. I think that that's all we can do as a human being. Yes, Marianne.
Marty, when I think about this, I've never gone to a funeral where someone said, "Oh, he was terrible. I'm so glad he's dead." No loss to this world. They will always find something good in the person to say. And I think the same thing is happening here. Do you overlook the badness, the mistakes? No, you don't. But do you forgive them? Yes. And do you realize that they may have struggled too, and that there is some spark of the divine, some spark of goodness in them, not just throw them in the ground and get rid of them. That it's just more than his physical death.
Sure.
That we have relatives that we remember. That it's more than physical going on.
That's right.
That
Mark Antony's soliloquy about the death of Caesar, it reminds me of that. David, do you remember that? Yeah. And it is the evil that men do is oft interred with their bones. In other words, we put those aside. And we think of all the great things they were able to accomplish. But we can still use those negative things as growing points to think about and to grow from. This person was able to overcome those negatives, whoever they are.
in most cases,
yeah.
In most cases, I would agree with Marianne. In very high cases, however, there could be some cases, depending on the crime, if you will, of a person, what that crime was. For example, the crime of murder in the first degree. Why are there special circumstances, which means a judge and jury found this person convicted of first-degree murder. So that becomes, for me, it becomes an issue because you removed the life of a human being. But more than that, the person who was murdered cannot say, "I forgive you." That's the clue. See, all other situations where the person has been a crime has been committed upon a person. If that person is alive, regardless of what, if that person has the ability to say, "I forgive you," not the family members, no one else, but that actual person. If that person says, "I forgive you," that's a big difference. That's a big difference between someone who has already been, and I'm not talking about someone who was killed. Somebody understands what is first-degree murder, what is murder. That's the planning. that you plan to take the life of a human being, and then you go through with that plan and do it. See, that person is no longer alive to say, I forgive you. That you have to take a real close look at that, in my opinion.
That's, I know, you've mentioned that before. That's
Yes.
true. So I would say, though, for the majority of human interactions,
Right, the majority.
this holds for the vast majority of human interactions. There's always an exception to the rule, but I think it's still good to think from the positive aspect of it. That's just me. That's just me. So anyway, any other comments about what we have just read? No other ideas? Okay, well then let's go on and start reading in Numbers 21, verse 1. Kent,
Sure. I've
I
got
was
it.
going to say, Kent, if you, and then I'll go to Michael, because I don't know if David can link up with us properly or not.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay,
When the Canaanite,
why don't you read from verse 1 through the end of verse, just a second, through the end of verse 4. Okay?
through the end of verse 4, got it.
Yes.
When the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the Negev, learned that Israel was coming by the way of Atharim, he engaged Israel in battle and took some of them captive. Then Israel made a vow to the Lord and said, if you deliver this people into our hand, we will proscribe their towns. The Lord heeded Israel's plea and delivered up the Canaanites, and they and their cities were proscribed. So that place was named Hormah. Before I go on, I just want to say I had to look up. Well, I thought I knew what the word prescribed means in Webster's, but it's defined here in the Tanakh as utterly destroy, reserving no booty except what is deposited in the sanctuary.
Right.
Okay, just a little reference. They set out from Mount Hor by way of the Sea of Reeds to skirt the land of Edom. But the people grew restive on the journey, and the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread and no water, and we have come to loathe this miserable food. The Lord
Okay,
sent.
let's stop there
Okay,
for a second.
got it.
So they're doing it again.
Mhm.
They're doing it
Yet
again.
Mhm.
Okay. First, they want God's help and everything, and then they wind up doing it again. Okay. They said that, when they say then Israel made a vow, that means all the people made a vow, and then they again they're breaking their vow even. So it is uh, it is another, if you will, whether it's gossip or evil tongue or things like that. It's again occurring among the Israelites. Any comments? Yes, Suzanne. Suzanne, you're muted.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I had my microwave on and anyways. Well, I was heating up my coffee, but anyways, what I started to say was that I can't help but wonder how much better their whole desert wandering experience would have been, instead of grumbling and complaining, that they just would have gone to Moses and said, we're running low on water. We may even be out. What could you please talk to God to help us out? And instead of this whining thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they got what they wanted because they kept complaining that they should have died in the desert or whatever. And God said, okay, well, you won't get to the promised land and you will die in the desert. I mean, it's like that. Be careful what you wish for.
That's it. And that we had a discussion about that. Also in the book of Genesis, when Rebecca sits on the idols,
Oh, yeah.
Ron cannot find the idols because she claims it's her time of the month, basically, that she can't move. And Jacob says, when he's asked, where are the idols? He says, well, we don't have it, but let anybody who's stolen them, not, be doomed. I'm summarizing. Okay.
Right.
And as a result, it's Rebecca that
That
winds
died.
up
Yeah.
dying on the highway there.
Yeah, she fulfilled what Jacob had essentially promised.
And we see it in the story of Noah. We had that discussion also in the past. Okay, so you got to be careful what you wish for. Yes, Marianne.
I think Suzanne really nailed that you have two
Yes.
choices. You can complain and complain and complain, or you can give thanks to God for everything, even the stuff you're complaining about. So I think that she really nailed that in there.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
to just don't complain all the time. Be grateful. Even if you would like something better, you've still got something good.
But there's one more step, and I think Michael addressed that before. I don't know if he's going to comment on that the same way, but you got to do something about it to improve the situation. You can't just rely on a source, an outside source all the time. You have to learn to be able to do it yourself too. Yes, Michael.
Yes, again, I wanted to respond to Marianne. She's correct. I lost the sight of my right eye about 6 years ago. I'm blind in my right eye. But I thank God when I light my Shabbat candles Friday night, I thank God for my left eye.
Yeah.
Because my left eye is, thank God, is perfect. So I don't complain about the left eye, the right eye that I can't see no more through, but I'm thankful for my left. And I pray to God that He keeps it safe for me.
Yeah.
So I
So
agree
these are
with
ways to overcome things that are negative in our lives. That's right. Any other comments? Michael, would you be able to read for us verses 6 through the end of 9?
Yeah, I can do it. I'm on a new Marty, I'm on a new program for my dry eyes, and it's working very well, thank God.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about it at another time.
Sure. Okay.
You might find it interesting. The Lord said to the serpents against the people, they bit the people and
Among the people.
among the people.
Right.
They bit the people, and many of the Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, we sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Intercede with the Lord to take away the serpents from us. And Moses interceded for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a serpent figure and mount it on the standard. And if anyone who is bitten looks at it, he shall recover. Moses made a copper serpent and mounted it on the standard. And when anyone was bitten by the serpent, he would look at the copper serpent and recover.
Okay.
Wow.
Again, thank you, Suzanne. I was wrong last week, and I apologize to everyone.
No worries.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, what do you take from this? Suzanne made me go to the books because when you don't, when you find something new, it's again, you have to move on and you have to learn from what you didn't know before. And so I did some reading about this, and it was very interesting what I came up with. But first, I always ask people, why is this placed here? What is this about the snakes? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not an Indiana Jones movie, okay? The
Yeah.
scene with the snakes and all that. This is something different.
Well, I'm a bit troubled by this because we talked, you spoke and others a few moments ago about the idols, and people would be doomed with idols. And here Moses is directed to create a copper, in effect, an idol that then people can look at or whatever it is, and then if they've been bitten, it'll heal them. And that's kind of like, where's that coming from? So that seems like an anomaly to me, and that's all I'll say about this part. But I would like to get back to the very first paragraph when we're through with discussing this of chapter 21, because that doesn't make much sense to me either, the way it's written. But I don't want to go there now. We can talk about the seraphs and the snakes.
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll come back to the other. Yes, Marcia.
Maybe instead of complaining, look to a way that you might find a solution to this problem.
Okay, yes.
We have a job also to do.
Yeah. I think that's part of the message in what we're reading. But why the snakes? Has anyone ever held snakes? Am I the only one?
Yes.
Okay, I guess so. Okay, go ahead, Suzanne, and then Kent had his hand up briefly.
No, it's just that I had held a snake when I was young.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, I did hold a snake. I didn't particularly like it, but I do have commentary.
Please.
Okay, now this is a Messiah interpretation of this, and
Yes, I have read. I know about the interpretation. Please go on.
okay,
Yes.
and you can either take it or leave it, but I just want to explain my viewpoint.
That's fine.
Well, the serpent, I wish I knew for sure what it says in the Hebrew, but I'm going to guess that serpent back in the Garden of Eden with Eve, the Hebrew word is nakash. So I'm going to guess that that's the same here. And my version says brass. In fact, any version I've read of this has always said that the serpent was made of brass. I never heard of copper, but brass has the meaning of
It's
judgment.
interchangeable. It's interchangeable in the
Okay.
different writings. It's interchangeable. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with judgment because that's how I understand it.
That's fine.
So Now, if if we compare this to the crucifixion, where to look up at Christ and accept him as the Son of God, that he died for our sins, and that will be healed, so to speak, and have eternal life with him and the Father and the Holy Spirit, then to me, this makes perfect sense and is a prelude to that concept, because the people don't have to do anything except believe. And that's true from the time Christ walked the earth and was crucified, even to this day. All you have to do is believe and accept him. So that's pretty much what's going on here. It's simple, it's easy. They don't have to do any Hail Marys or, nothing like that. And so God provided a way for them to escape the penalty of death, of sin. And many of you have heard me say over the years, the wages of sin is death. And that's what these serpents were doing. I personally don't believe they're snakes. I mean, that's just me. Although it's probably easy for us to understand them like that, but I just don't believe they're snakes. I don't know what they are exactly, because the Bible never provided a physical description of a serpent. But anyway, so that's how I see it. This is
Yeah,
a
I think that's
precursor to
very
Christ.
important. And that's an important thing from the Christian standpoint. We've already discussed from the Jewish standpoint, the faith, from the standpoint of faith, same thing, same concept. Yes, Marianne, before I.
Yeah, I think Suzanne and Marcia are making good points that
Yes.
you can pray and pray and pray, but if you don't get into action on your prayers, you may as well just be talking to the wall. I live with a fatal illness, and I think at first I was really angry. Today, I thank God for that illness. It has taught me so much about God, about food, about health, about this world that we live in. So, in some ways, no, in all ways, that this is a blessing. If, like Marcia said, you work on it and you get into action, that just don't sit there whining and complaining, that you must do something to work with God, in God's plan for you. That's kind of how I see this. And I would love to get one of those poles with a snake on it and put it in my house.
Okay.
I would.
By the way,
I would. I have my house. Yeah. Anyway, that's how I live.
well,
But,
I was going to say this symbol. I'll say it now. I was going to say it later, but the symbol of the snake on a staff is used by the medical profession.
mhm.
Okay, for the same reason. It had healing properties, and yes, what Kent raised, the question that Kent raised. Well, wait a minute. Wouldn't this be you're looking at it and it has healing properties? This is like an idol that the people would wind up worshiping. And indeed, there was a sect that went its own way. And after several hundred years, they petered out, but it was banned by the majority of Israelites from Solomon's time on. Nobody ever did it anymore in the Israelites, but this one particular group did. There's also commentary that people have said, well, the snakes breathed fire. Well, that goes back to another commentary that the bite of the snake burned like fire. And so you can take it any way you wish. I mean, that I told you I did homework. I spent hours at this. And so, but when you hear about this, yeah, a lot can be said about this passage. But why snakes in particular? There is,
Well,
go ahead,
may I?
go
Well,
ahead.
I recall an exhibit, particularly of Tutankhamun, the pharaoh of Egypt,
Mhm.
where the serpent or a snake, whatever it was on in gold
Yes.
on a staff, on the head thing. I mean, all sorts of places. So perhaps there's some reference to the actual Exodus or
Yes, there is. And by the way, this is been done have been mentioned by a lot of uh, scholars in Judaism as well. Uh, and so I'm just going to make some comments about it, and then I'll say something that the others really they don't specifically say it. Rashi says that the snakes were there to bite them because of the slanderous statements about manna and water. Ibn Ezra, who's another scholar in later years, uh, this would be like 11th to 12th century, says uh, it was due to the arrogance of the Israelites, that the way they spoke to God. We've spoken a little bit about this arrogance. Rabbi Udon, uh, Aaron had died and was the only one who could remedy snake bites. Interesting. It's through his staff, through using his staff, which I found it interesting. And it's there is then there is an interpretation in the 1600s by a rabbi Or HaHaim. Destructive forces in our world are nothing but the creatures we cause to come into being through our sins are what caused the snakes to occur. Yes, please, Suzanne.
Oh, me. Just a couple things. I still think that that the serpents were chosen because the one in the Garden of Eden, by deceiving Eve, and Eve falling for what he said, caused the death of Adam and Eve. They lost their immortality because of what the serpent did.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
I think that's the connection. And I don't believe that God intended this to be an idol, because he
Right.
clearly does not say to pray to it
Correct.
or bring it offerings, none of that. All you had to do was look up at it, and that was it. And to me, that's not idol worship, at least
Okay.
as I understand it.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. But there's something here that so I did some more thinking uh, about slander, about gossip. You said, and also the Israelites was saying one thing, yet believing in doing another.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Do you
true.
remember the old Native American concept of speaking with a forked tongue?
Mm-hmm.
That's a snake's tongue. Hmm. And maybe this is a fitting punishment for behaving in a slanderous manner, using gossip. Hey, the sages also say gossip is one of the worst things that could be done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when the burning aspect to the snake bites, think of it as burning the soul. It burns the soul, not necessarily a fire, flame, and thunder, you know, like a dragon or something like that. But maybe when you gossip or you slander people, you poke fun of them in jest, and looking at something some aspect of their physical body or something they may not be able to speak properly, and making fun of that. And then you go up to them and pat them on the back and say you're a nice guy, but in the meantime, you've said other things about them. You're speaking with a forked tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the snake bite is there to try to teach a lesson. I don't know. Nobody's written that. That's another midrash from Marty. It's a Marty drash.
It's very good.
But can there be other things? When I do that, I try to get you guys to think about other possible things, because by the way, gossip is considered worse than killing, than actually committing a planned murder, Michael. Gossip is considered worse by the rabbis in their teachings. And so maybe that's what this is speaking to. I don't know.
And how would gossip, just a question, how would gossip be worse than a
Because
planned
not
killing?
only do you murder the person, you don't murder the person physically, you're murdering his soul. You're burning his soul. You're burning your soul. You are passing that along to other people who will pass, just like a chain letter or whatever. That information is out there and people start copying it. And if even if your behavior is poor and people start copying it,
Well,
it leads to bad things, and it's worse. Murder is, and the reason they say that is because murder is finite, but gossip and slander is everlasting.
well, murder, okay, murder is final,
Yeah.
and that's final, murder.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're talking about is not final. Something can still be done about that. When you gossip, that can be corrected. Not always, not easy, but it can be corrected. But murder cannot be undone.
Well, that's why people apologize when they've said something in error, to put an end to it.
Mhm. Marty, if you just the word apologize, see,
Yeah.
I don't see in this section, I'm
It's
from
not in
line
there.
4
That's right.
to line 9, any sort of remorse other than, hey, Moses, help us,
Right.
we're getting bit. No, they haven't fallen on their faces. They haven't done anything like that. So,
Right.
at any rate, I just don't.
But that's the
Um,
point of this. Kent, you hit on a point, and that's the other thing I wanted to address. It says in verse 2, then Israel made a vow to the Lord and said, if you deliver us into our, if you deliver this people into our hand, Canaan into our hand, we will prescribe their towns. So they know that they can all speak in unison. And
Right,
God
that's
will
something I
hear.
wanted to get back to. But I
Yes.
was looking at this section about
And then
the
they come,
serpents and the
they still
serpent.
don't get it. They still don't get it.
Yeah.
It's what they say and what they do that's equally as important as Moses. In our religion, we do not need an intermediary. We don't need a
Right.
priest or any, we have a direct line.
Which
And
was
now,
most interesting in the beginning of that chapter 21,
that's right.
because it was the people like collectively and had
Yes.
said, hey, if you do this and you okay, since we're back on
Go
the
ahead. Go ahead.
line 1, can I go back to that, the very first
Sure.
paragraph? All right, so that's something that I wanted to mention, was that it wasn't Moses asking for an intercession of God. It was somehow the whole people came together and they were united. Okay, but then it I think it implies, if not implies, they actually had moved from Mount Hor, that area,
Mm-hmm.
and the Canaanite, the king of Arad, attacked them, took some
Mm-hmm.
captives. Then you go down to line 4. This is after they then overcame the Canaanites, destroyed their towns. So they had to have moved from where they were, would you say? Because
Mm-hmm.
the towns weren't exactly where they were. Then it says in line 4, they set out from Mount Hor. Well, what I don't get any of that. I'm not tracking that.
Now, we have run across this several times in Torah, the most obvious being, again, in the book of Genesis, where you have two creation stories, right? You have chapter 1 and chapter 2. And basically they are different. And this has led, and this is where I thought it was important to basically end things by saying this is the blending of two different interpretations. It's the J and the E interpretations that have been combined here. That's what our scholars tell us. And you hit the nail on the head also when you point this out, because the story, it's like a slightly different way of putting it. And that's where the comments are made by the more modern scholars. Well, this is the J and E versions that they've tried to squish together.
Mm-hmm.
But we've run into that before. And as a result, it can be confusing in time and place. Maybe that's what has led us to think of Torah, don't try to follow things in time and place.
Right. And you know what? I think that's the right answer, because it could be, when this was written down,
Yes.
that it was a little just out of sequence. It was just
Yes.
because
And
it
we
sticks
came
out
across,
like a sore thumb.
yes. And indeed, we came across that in the book of Leviticus. We discussed it there too, where things did not seem to be just so. And the more modern day scholars say, well, this points more to they use that as more evidence to say that it's a compilation of different authors.
Got it. Okay.
Different God-inspired authors. So I just found, Suzanne, I blame all this on you.
Oh,
But
that's
thank
okay,
thank
Marty.
you for teaching me something. But you see, so I'm going to use my own experience as an example that here I made a big error and I could have misled a lot of people, let it go by and people then walk away, but I wasn't going to do that. I had to make this into a teaching opportunity. So that's why I did this, because we have to learn from our mistakes, and then we have to when we say we're sorry, that's okay, but we got to take it one step further. We're supposed to do it. We're supposed to change what we did. So I'm using myself as an example here. And thank you, Suzanne, for giving me the opportunity to do that.
If I can add one more thing,
Sure, Marion, sure.
I have,
Oh, Suzanne, I didn't know who was
yeah,
talking.
it was me. I have a couple maps that I could, well, I guess it would be best to take a screenshot so that I could share next week, because I know there's a way we can share something so everybody can see it. And I
Okay.
think if we look at the overall map, I think it'll be more clear.
Yes. If several things there that you came up with, for those of you who have plowed, if you go back in plowed and leaf through where the maps we have gone through, in the other books and like that, you will see how the journey, multiple paths that the Israelites might have gone through. And so it may show up in other commentaries too, but if not, you can also get it on Google. Okay, Google Maps or DuckDuckGo Maps. Okay,
Mhm.
and you can get either one. All right, but Suzanne, yes, we can start off with you sharing that with us next week.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yes, Marianne.
I have a question on the second line. Then Israel made a vow to the Lord and said, if you deliver this people into our hands, we will prescribe their towns. It almost sounds like they're playing, let's make a deal with God. You do this for me, then I'll do that for you. That seems a little backwards to me.
It is an attempt to do something, but it comes out wrong. You are correct.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah,
Because
it does seem backwards. Yeah.
yeah, it is, but this has been also said, we say that all the time, and do we really always uphold what we ask for? When we do that. And that's so we're advised not to quite word it that way. Good point, Marianne.